Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with the Haydn Symphony Crusade. And we're up to number 103. The final countdown is sort of beginning, or count up, however you want to do it. We've got, 4 more videos after this one. We have to do 104, the Symphony Concertante and Symphony A and B. Yeah. And then we'll have done all of them. I'm really excited. I mean, really excited about, finishing this and going back and watching what I've done, because I have no recollection of any of it. I have to tell you, I do these videos, and they're all more or less, I pick the musical examples, and then I just talk. It's impromptu. And so it's interesting to go back and see what I've actually said about some of these pieces, especially the less familiar early ones. Anyway, that's me. And as far as the Drumroll Symphony goes, which is number 103, there are many interesting things to talk about. In some ways, it's an incredibly iconic work and a wonderful exemplar of the classical symphony. In other ways, it's absolutely unique in what it does, especially in its first movement, in the relationship between the slow introduction and the ensuing allegro, which is really quite extraordinary. But let's start with the drum roll, shall we? Because, it's just a subject of controversy. What Haydn wrote, and it seems to be perfectly clear what he wrote, was a fermata over a drum roll. And then over the drum roll, he writes the word intrada, which is an introduction of some kind. Now, the obvious intention, it seems to me, but one that we didn't hear until Harnoncourt and the period instrument people got a hold of the work, was that the timpanist should play some sort of improvised fanfare-like introduction, ending in the long drum roll, which is the fermata. It's the end of something. You do the intrada and it ends with a long roll. That roll should probably start loud and diminuendo, or it could be soft and mysterious and do a hairpin. You can do anything you want, because Haydn doesn't say what to do. It's a freestyle moment. But until very recently, until the period instrument people started to take this music seriously and really think about it, the introductory roll was played usually softly, maybe swelling, just as a roll. Nothing before it, no intrada. Just the roll itself was the intrada, which doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But anyway, they would do it that way. Or then there was a whole other, strain of thought that felt that the drum roll should start loud and make a diminuendo, which is, for example, what Leonard Bernstein does in his recording of it. Well, I really am of the opinion that the intrada means what it says, and that the timpanist should be allowed to go to town at the opening a little bit, tastefully, but, and then make the diminuendo. The biggest evidence for that, I think, if we need evidence other than Haydn's own words and the definition of what an intrada ought to be, is that audiences in Haydn's day were not quiet. Witness the Surprise Symphony, where it's a loud bang, or where there's a bassoon fart, or there's something. Most of Haydn's surprises involve extreme changes in dynamics one way or another, because people went to concerts, the lights stayed on, they admired each other's dresses, if they were female, or some of them were male, who knows. But they talked. They applauded in the middle of movements. If they heard something they clapped. If they wanted something encore, they'd shout, "Encore!" They participated. It was a circus. It was very, very different from the kind of post-romantic, spiritual, very solemn concert experience that we inflict on our audiences today. And so, in order to get their attention, that intrada had to be striking. It had to be loud. It would be almost impossible, I think, to begin a symphony with a pianissimo drum roll, even though what happens after is very quiet. What you want to do is get people to pay attention, grab them, and then do the very quiet thing. That to me is just the most logical explanation of what Haydn actually wrote. So the performance that we're going to hear, which is Barry Wordsworth and the Capella Istropolitana on Naxos, it's not a great performance. It just isn't. I'm telling you right now up front. But I have permission to use it, and it gets the job done in introducing you to the music. And then you can go listen to other versions that are perhaps a bit more dynamic. But it's decent enough. But it begins with the pianissimo, the traditional pianissimo drum roll. So I'm just telling you, that's how it starts. Then there's the introduction, the rest of the introduction. Ooh, it is spooky, creepy. And here is another thing that's so interesting about, Haydn generally, I think, and the classical symphony. I mean, it's in E flat major, the symphony. It's a happy piece, basically. But it's constantly dealing with shadow. There's light and shade. It's not just inane, it's thoughtful. And it has a very wide range of expression. I mean, the opening is probably the darkest, gloomiest thing that anybody wrote until the beginning of Tchaikovsky's Pathetique Symphony. I mean, it's really that dark. It's marvelous. It's absolutely marvelous. Some people have said that the first four notes, which are similar to the first four notes of the Dies Irae Gregorian chant, da, 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 da. The rest of it is da, bum, ba, bum. None of the rest of it sounds like the Dies Irae. So I don't buy every time people hear those first four notes, they go, Dies Irae. Well, no, I don't. You have to do more, frankly, to be quoting the Gregorian chant about the Day of Judgment and whatnot. I mean, it makes wonderful programmatic speculation, doesn't it? And who knows, maybe Haydn really thought that, but he doesn't keep it up. So let's not worry about that at all. I don't find that a very persuasive argument. It's just a very, very dark opening. And at the end of this introduction, you have to listen for the opening of the ensuing allegro, because it starts to take shape. It does. The opening tune of the allegro is dum bum ba dum bum ba dum ba da 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 bum. It does that. It begins with two repeated notes and then a sort of a dum bum yeah dum bum, half step motive. Well, that is where the introduction is headed. You start hearing two repeated note phrase and the yada da da. You hear those two ideas start to form out of the inchoate nebula of music that Haydn has generated. And when we get to the allegro, that's going to be how it takes shape. So there's a wonderful relationship there already between the introduction and the main theme of the allegro. But Haydn has more in store for us, and so we'll get to that momentarily. Let's begin with the introduction. Now, did you notice at the end, as it started to sort of become thematic? Dum bum, da dum, like that. Yeah, that's what happens. And so, having heard the introduction, we need to go straight in to the complete exposition, which has two very firm, juicy subjects. Pay attention to the following. Most of the themes begin with two repeated notes, and some of them end with two repeated notes. Dun, 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 dun. That idea of these phrases or little bits of themes that have two or three repeated notes. In the motion music, you get four repeated notes. Chunk, 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 1, 2, 3, 4. That's going to be important later on. And a very nicely formed, lovely, lovely second subject. Ya, da, 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 dum, bum. Two notes, repeated. Bum, bum, yum, ba, da, dum, bum, ba, da, dum, bum. It's lovely. Absolutely lovely. And the lead back to the exposition repeat is extremely well judged by Haydn. I play you the tiny, tiny moment where the exposition repeats because it's just so perfectly touched in. It flows beautifully, and you don't feel at all that you're like going back, and it's, it doesn't, it just all just seamlessly, it's seamlessly welded together. So here is the exposition. Now, the other thing I want you to keep in mind with that opening tune is that it's what I call an up and down tune. That is, it has two phrases. One goes up, one goes down. Da 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 dum ba da 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 bum da 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 ba da 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 bum. Get it? Whoop, up, down. The king of up and down themes was Dvorak. He loved up and down themes. I mean, you could just, the finale of the Fourth Symphony, dun 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 ba dum bum 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 ba dum, like that. Or da-dum-ba-dum, da-dum-ba-dum, the finale of his First Symphony. You hear them all over the place in Dvorak. He loved that structure. Haydn enjoyed it too. He liked it. He did it quite a few times. We'll hear another one in the next symphony, actually. But keep in mind up and down themes as well. So that brings us to the end of the exposition. Now, in the development section, Haydn does something fairly radical. He integrates the introduction to the development. And so it starts out with the themes that we already have heard, the regular exposition themes, but then it stops dead in its tracks, and we hear the introduction speeded up, grinding away at the cellos and basses, da 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 da, like that. And on top of it, you hear those little four-note sniglets, dun 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 dun, ya da da dum, dun 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 dun, da 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 da, like that. And it's really, really cool because it treats the introduction as part of the basic thematic material. And it's something that composers from later in the Romantic period and Beethoven and moments like his Pathetique Sonata and things were really going to pick up on. I mean, there had been returns to introductions before. Haydn did one in one of his most famous Paris symphonies. We talked about it, where there's an introduction where you go back to the beginning of the introduction for the exposition repeat. It's not totally unheard of, but it's the integration that Haydn achieves in this particular movement that makes it, such a natural and interesting, transformative part of the onward symphonic drama that makes it kind of special. So here is that moment in the development section. And last but not least, the recapitulation and coda are equally fascinating because at this point we get to the second subject in the recapitulation, which is unusual for Haydn in that it seems to be quite regular. Haydn's recapitulations, as we've talked about many times, are often extremely compressed. He tends to, omit things, so he has time to do things in the coda and to shorten and compress wherever he can, especially if the movement is monothematic, that is all based on a single initial theme, which this one is not. So we get a pretty regular recapitulation, but then after the second subject appears, there are some really dramatic fortissimo eruptions of the timpani of the full orchestra, which need to be treated with far more violence than they are in this particular performance, I might add. But they do them. The period instrument people do that well, by the way. And then, the actual introduction comes back, complete with its intrada. And one of the fascinating things about this is that, about doing it as an intrada, with an improvised timpani solo, is that it doesn't have to be the same the second time around. I mean, when it returns, it could be different. It's improvised. The timpanist can do whatever he wants. There's such a failure of imagination in performance of this music, I find. Even with a lot of the period instrument people, it's like, we're going to do the same thing. You don't have to do the same thing. Do the most interesting thing. That's what you ought to do within, the bounds of good taste and the idiomatic style, of course. But anyway, the introduction returns, and then as soon as it takes off again, after the introduction is interrupted by the end of the recapitulation, or the end of what was the end of the exposition, which is now the end of the recapitulation, leading to the coda, we get a speeded up version of the introduction, which Haydn used before, but you probably didn't recognize it for what it was. Dum bum 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 ba da dum ba da dum ba da da bum 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 ba da dum ba da dum bum 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 bum. It's so quick that you probably wouldn't even notice that it is actually note for note the tune of the introduction. But here Haydn puts them right next to each other, so you have a chance to recognize it. We heard it already way back in the exposition, and I didn't point it out there because, what's the point? It just flies by in a second. You don't notice. But now Haydn says, you see? It's been there all along. So you'll hear the introduction that returns, and then immediately when the full orchestra jumps back in, the fast version of the introduction. So you get them right next to each other, and then on to the jolly, rollicking coda. So here it is. I begin with the recapitulation of the second subject, so you get the lead-in to the return of the movement's introduction. It's just so brilliantly done. It's like painful how thrilling Haydn does this. Thrillingly. It's incredible. Here it is. And with that, we come to one of the most sophisticated and formally interesting of all of Haydn's first movements. But it shows, as I was saying about this being like an iconic classical symphony, that the general rule in classical symphonies and concertos is that the biggest and most complex movement happens first, up front. And after that, the music, progressively becomes easier, more relaxed. The intellectual hard work happens up front, and it does here. It really does. It's not always the rule in Haydn symphonies. It really isn't. He experimented with all kinds of balance between the movements. But here we have a particularly good example of a wonderfully original, sophisticated, but still very easy to follow at the end of the day, opening movement, but it's large and it's on a grand scale. And then after that, things are going to become progressively lighter, but no less interesting in my view, and certainly no less sophisticated. You just don't have to work as hard. You don't have to notice as many things. So we don't have as many musical examples. The second movement, for example, is a theme and variations. It's actually variations on alternating themes. One is in the minor, the other is in the major. They're both very clearly related to each other. They are march tempo themes. And if you want to hear a much later version of a similar concept, for me anyway, you notice that the opening theme of Schubert's great Ninth Symphony, the second movement, da da dum da dum ba da dum bum bum bum, that wonderful little march, that is the clear descendant of the theme at the beginning of the slow movement of this symphony. The theme, by the way, is supposed to be a Croatian folk song, and it seems pretty certain that it is, because the Croatian folk song sounds just like this, actually two Croatian folk songs. You will notice in the major key theme, after we hear the minor key theme, the two-note sniglets. Remember dum bum ba dum bum ba dum? Well, it's dum ba da dum bum ba ya dum bum dun 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 and trills, which become crazier and wackier as the movement goes on. But we don't have to play the variations. I just need to play the themes. And then you can turn yourself loose and listen to the wonderful, wonderful things that Haydn does with them. He does not change them very much. He changes the scoring, the volume, that sort of thing. But the themes themselves stay pretty clear because they're wonderful. They're just wonderful themes. And all they need to do is alternate to provide a totally captivating series of not just variations, but contrasts. This movement was encored, supposedly, at the premiere of the symphony. It was wildly popular, and I can't for a moment, not understand why, because it's just great. Here are the two tunes. Wonderful stuff, right? And this idea of, variations on two alternating themes was picked up. Haydn had done it several times before already. We've already discussed those examples, but this became the model for the adagio, the great adagio in Beethoven's Ninth, and also later movements by Bruckner and Mahler. And it became a thing. And Haydn invented the thing, like he did most things. So the third movement, Minuet, is quite fascinating as well, because it is clearly an outline, a sketch of the theme of the second movement. I mean, it seems like it's just leaping up and down. It's a yodeling theme, actually, people have said, real Austrian yodel. I haven't yodeled recently. As far as I'm concerned, a yodel is a chocolate snack cake with like vanilla cream in it. But anyway, dum ba da dum bum ba da dum. Notice two notes. Dum bum bum. Repeated notes on the bottom of each phrase. Dum ba da dum ba da dum. It's a outline of the theme of the slow movement. I mean, and when I say that, it's like you're going to scratch your head probably saying, what are you talking about? Well, let me play it for you, and then the entire minuet part. We're not going to listen to the trio, but I'll talk about it in a minute. The entire minuet part, and then you can see exactly what I mean. Just listen to it hop up and hop down like it does. So what do I mean by an outline? Simplification. Dum ba da dum bum ba da. Excuse me. I'm doing the rhythm of the second theme and the harmony of the first. Dun do 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 bo bo do bo bo do do do. Okay, so you've got the tune of the slow movement. If you were to take out all the middle notes and just do the top and the bottom of the phrase, you wind up with the theme of the minuet. Bum ba da dum. Imagine just going dum do 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 like that. Trust me. They're very, very similar. Haydn is just sort of taking the high points and the low points and connecting the dots in the minuet. But one thing you find with this theme, and you'll hear it with all the themes and all the movements of the whole symphony, is that they all follow this sort of wavy pattern, like a V shape, or an inverted V. Dun dun da dun dun da dun ba da da dum bum. It's like up and down and up and down. So you get that in the second movement. Do 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 do. It's up and down and up like that. And then when you get to the minuet, it's bum ba da dum bum ba da dum bum ba da dum bum ba da dum. It's up and down and up and down. They all do that. So remember when I said that the theme of the first movement Allegro was an up and down theme. It's an up and down. The whole symphony is an up and down thing. It really is. There's a lot of that in music generally, but this is a particularly cogent example of another one of those. Again, all those essential musical facts that we talk about. And in this particular case, it's not that Haydn's doing something that's particularly original. It's that he's using the thing which may be the common coin of music and making something significant out of it, building a larger work around the idea, making it his own. In other words, lots of composers do the same thing with their themes, but Haydn makes it meaningful. And so every time we hear something like that, we understand how he's using it as a way to create musical coherence throughout the structure of the entire symphony. And this is particularly clear when we get to the finale. Let me just mention quickly, though, the trio of the Minuet, which is quite lovely and features strings and clarinets. We don't get a lot of clarinets in these symphonies, even the ones that have clarinets, because Haydn's players must not have been really that great. He doesn't trust them very often. So they pop up, and they contribute to the general sound of the orchestra quite a bit. But in terms of like solo licks and whatnot, here the clarinets double the violins, and it's a lovely sound. A beautiful, open, airy sound, and another very wavy theme as well. So we come to the finale. Now, the finale is a monothematic sonata rondo, which we've talked about before. And it's so monothematic that there's no point even worrying about what the form is. Everything comes out of the opening idea. The opening idea is bifurcated. You have a horn call. Da, 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 da. Note the wave, so up and down. And then you have an up and down theme in the violins. Da, 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 dum, ba, da, dum, bum, bum. Da, 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 dum, bum, bum, like that. It's up and it's down. It's that wave motion that we've heard throughout this symphony. Think of the opening theme of the first movement. Dum bum ba dum bum 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 ba da da dum bum dum bum ba dum bum 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 ba da da dum bum. And the finale. Dun 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 ba dum bum bum dun 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 da dum bum bum. Except the finale one begins with 4 repeated notes, which were a thing in the first movement, only not as much of a thing as they become in the finale. And then the up and down type theme. So we see that they are all related, wonderfully related. It's fabulous just how related everything is. But this movement is, it's I don't know how to describe it. It's wonderfully, it's relaxed. Because it's all based on the same thing. And how Haydn keeps the repetition, the constant repetition of this da 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 da, da that little horn call, and keeps it interesting and constantly varying, and it's kind of a miracle. It really is. It's phenomenal. And the second subject, it has a really clearly defined second subject, which is, it's monothematic. It's based on the first subject. Da 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 dum bum bum. And when it goes off in that lyrical sort of extension with the lower strings, what do we hear? We're really hearing a recollection, a vague recollection, possibly, of the introduction of the whole symphony. That low gliding, almost spooky music of the cellos and basses. It's not the same tune, not at all, because Haydn has somehow blended them together. But the atmosphere is similar, and it jogs the memory. So even though the finale is largely happy and it doesn't have the emotional extremes of the first movement, it doesn't ignore them either. It somehow reconciles them all in a beautifully sculpted, ongoing flow of music. So all I have to play is the entire, very long exposition, first episode type thing of this particular movement. You have all the material that you need, and then you can listen to the whole work on your own. So here it is, the first bit, the exposition / ritornello / second subject / first episode of the monothematic sonata rondo finale of the Drumroll Symphony. so beautiful. There's a wistfulness to it. It's not facile. I mean, there's nothing about this music that's cheap. I mean, it's happy, but it has depth. It has happy depth of happiness. Happy can be just as deep as tragedy, of course, as sadness, but this is deep happy. It really is. It's happy that's gotten where it's gotten because it knows what it is. Does that make any sense? Okay, I'm going to stop. There we have it. One more mature symphony to go. Oh boy, the excitement is building. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks so much for joining me. Take care.